Springboks Rugby not too far away, guys, for 2025. Awesome season for them in 2024. Very good performances. How will they go in the 2025 schedule? Be interesting. Guys, so firstly, the Springboks, they have their home tests in the July series. So first two games on the 5th and 12th of July against Italy. The first one being at Pretoria and then the second one at Nelson Mandela Stadium in Guebha. Those first two games, look, you'd imagine the Springboks will probably bring in some of their young talent, maybe rest some of their older, more experienced players and try and develop some depth. The thing is that Italy, though, the recent Six Nations, they did quite well. They're certainly a developing international side, and on their day, they're definitely capable of taking it to the Springboks. So it'll be interesting to see the selection mixes that Russie goes with there. You know, the level of bringing in the inexperienced players versus experienced to obviously make sure they have a couple of home wins at home. So, but a couple of real belters there. And look, they'll be really good test matches, especially against a quality Italian side. The next one on the 19th of July against Georgia at Mombella Stadium, Nelspruit. So again, that's probably another test. I imagine they'll bring in some younger players, develop some depth for the Springboks. And again, that Georgian side, you know, you'd imagine at home the Springboks would win comfortably. But look, on their day, that Georgia side is certainly a developing international side as well. And I wouldn't take them lightly, that's for sure. You know, they have beaten the Wales in 2022. Yeah, so we then jump over to the Rugby Championship for the Springboks. So that begins on the 16th of August and then the following week on the 23rd of August. So 16th of August, they play Australia in Johannesburg at the Ellis Park, and then the 23rd of August, they play Australia again in Cape Town. So I suppose the thoughts on that, particularly that first game, the 16th of August in Johannesburg, certainly that altitude will favour the Springboks significantly against the Wallabies. I'm sure that the Springboks will really bring that physicality, that box kicking, look to blow the Wallabies off the park. I suppose conversely though, you know, last year the Wallabies were a developing side, but particularly this year in Super Rugby, the Australians players have been much better than they were in 2024. And you just look to some of the super sides like the Brumbies, you know, their players are bringing the physicality at super level, and then, you know, they're scoring tries at 15, 20 plus phases. So I'm sure they'll be much more competitive than they were in 2024. Obviously, Super Rugby is a long way off test match level, but I would expect some good games of rugby there. And then the game in Cape Town, a bit more at sea level. Again, I would expect a similar sort of game. The Springboks will try and bash the Wallabies off the park with their physicality and then shift the ball with speed and take it to them. But again, both those games I think will be closer than they were in 2024, and they'll be awesome games to watch for Springbok supporters. Cool, next game. Saturday the 6th of September versus the All Blacks at Eden Park. Oof. That will be a belter, an absolute belter. I suppose, firstly, and let me know your thoughts underneath, guys. You look at both sides, like the All Blacks, they haven't lost there for a number of years, since 1994. You know, they'll be absolutely desperate to keep that legacy going. Alternately, the Springboks will be absolutely desperate to win. You know, imagine if the Springboks could be the first team to beat the All Blacks at Eden Park for 30 years. That would be awesome for the Springboks. So I'm sure both teams will be absolutely desperate in that game. I mean, a couple of other things to consider. You know, will travel be a challenging factor for the Springboks? Flying all the way from South Africa to New Zealand, jet lag, will that be an issue? Maybe not. And then the other thing I would say about Eden Park, I've been to a lot of stadiums in the world, and I do think that there is a spiritual element at Eden Park. I feel it's the most Kiwi-style stadium in New Zealand, and I certainly, when teams go there, they know they're in New Zealand. They've got that spirit behind the All Blacks. Again, will that be a factor? Don't know. Let me know your thoughts if that will be a factor for the All Blacks. But ultimately, this is a class Springboks side. There's a lot of talk about this being the best Springboks side ever of all time. So yeah, an absolute belter coming up, and I can't wait, guys. The following week, on the 13th of September, the Springboks play the All Blacks in Wellington. And again, Springboks versus All Blacks, it's always going to be a belter, isn't it? Both sides absolutely desperate to win. Good rugby. Next games, the 27th of September, the Springboks play Argentina at Hollywood Kings Park in Durban. And then the following week, on the 4th of October, the Springboks play Argentina in Twickenham. So, I mean, firstly, that first game in Durban, home game for the Springboks against the Pumas, so that will help the Springboks there. But it'll be a tough game against a quality Argentinian side. Certainly, we've seen in years that Argentina forward pack, the physicality they bring, they're capable of really taking it to the Springboks and testing them. So, yeah, that'll be an absolute belter for the Springboks. And then, yeah, quite interesting, following week in Twickenham against the Pumas. So, something different, but I'm sure there'll be a good crowd at Twickenham for that. The Springboks is Argentina, and it'll be another absolute belter between good rugby sides. So then have a couple of weeks off, and the Springboks then begin their Northern Hemisphere tour. So that begins on Saturday the 8th of November with an absolute belter, the Stade de France in Paris. Yeah, that'll be an absolute belter. Obviously the French will want revenge after the World Cup. The French, obviously Six Nations champions. And they were really, really impressive in that Six Nations, particularly their mix, that French physicality with their forward pack. Some big lumps of men will look to take it to the Springboks and match that quality Springboks forward pack. And then the French, they just play the French way. It's beautiful to watch. You just don't know what they're going to do on attack, whether or not they're passing inside or they offload or a crossfield kick. They simply just play what's in front of them, and they are really, really effective on attack. So, yeah, it'll be a great game for the Springboks, and it'll be interesting to see if Russie tries anything new against the French, or the style that the Springboks play against the French. So, an absolute belter there. The following week, on the 15th of November, the Springboks play the Italians at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. So, again, I probably think that test match, it'll be interesting what Russie does, whether or not he rests some of the experienced players and brings on some of the younger players to develop that Springbok depth. Be interesting. But certainly he will have to balance that off with experience versus inexperience, because that is a good Italian side, and we've seen how effective they were at the Six Nations. The following week, on the 22nd of November, at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. That will be an absolute cracker, guys. The Irish will really come to play. Again, that'll be quite interesting, the styles that both teams play. Again, the Irish team, I imagine they'll really look to match the Springboks up front with their forwards and play the Irish way, cohesive speed, and test that Springbok defence. Alternatively, how will the Springboks play? Will they play the tight physical game, or will they look to shift the ball into space? Yeah, that'll be an absolute belter at Dublin. And then the final game for the year on the 29th of November, Springboks versus Wales at Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. So again, that will be an absolute cracker of a game as well. It'll be interesting to know or see how many inexperienced players or youngest players Russie brings into that game to develop depth versus the experienced players. Look, Wales is a developing side. They didn't have a good Six Nations, but there's some real young talent coming through in Wales. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see the selections that Russie goes with against the Welsh side later in the year. And it'll be interesting to see where that Welsh side is at later in the year. Are they still a bit off the mark, or has this young talent really developed and they're a quality international side? That will be quite interesting. So, guys, let me know your thoughts on the Springboks schedule for 2025. what do you think are the biggest games in 2025, or the ones that you're most excited about? Plenty of games in 2025, an absolute cracking test schedule, and it'll be interesting to see how the Springboks go in 2025. Will they do pretty well again like 2024? Guys, let me know your thoughts on the schedule below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it with mates, and chuck some banter down again below. Cheers.